Hello everyone! Welcome to Literature Revision with Mr. Johnston. Today, we are going to look at our third extract of Chapter 1, Hyde Tramples a Young Girl. Before we begin, you may be interested in seeing my free resource on this extract. Click a link in the description box below to download this document for free. The resource comes complete with writing tables for taking notes, short writing tasks, and exemplar paragraphs. And now, on to Chapter 1. This video is going to answer the following question. How does Stevenson present Hyde as an evil character? Let's first of all summarize this extract. In our last lesson, we learned that every Sunday, Utterson goes for a walk with his friend and cousin, Richard Enfield. One Sunday, they are walking down a pleasant-looking street. Utterson and Enfield then see a sinister-looking building. The building looks unsavory and neglected. Later in the novel, it is revealed that this building is Jekyll's laboratory, the place where Hyde was first created. Enfield recounts an incident that he saw outside this building. Late one night, Enfield was walking down an empty street, and then he witnessed a terrible crime take place. Enfield saw a repulsive-looking man, named Mr. Hyde, trample over a young girl. Angry witnesses to this crime surrounded Hyde. Hyde went into the sinister-looking building to fetch a cheque and cash amounting to £100 as payment for the young girl's family. And, as we know, Enfield was surprised to see that the name on the cheque belonged to a respectable gentleman. Later in the novel, we discover that this gentleman was Dr. Jekyll. We're now going to read the actual extract. If you would like to skip the reading, just jump to this time of the video. Well, it was this way, returned Mr. Enfield. I was coming home from some place at the end of the world about 3 o'clock of a black winter morning, and my way lay through a part of town where there is literally nothing to be seen but lamps, street after street, and all the folks asleep. Street after street, all lighted up as if for a procession, and all as empty as a church. Till at last I got into that state of mind when a man listens and listens, and begins to long for the sight of a policeman. All at once I saw two figures, one a little man who was stumping along eastward at a good walk, and the other a girl of maybe 8 or 10, who was running as hard as she was able down a cross street. Well, sir, the two ran into one another naturally enough at the corner, and then came a horrible part of the thing. For the man trampled calmly over the child's body, and left her screaming on the ground. It sounds nothing to hear, but it was hellish to see. It wasn't like a man. It was like some damned juggernaut. I gave a view halloa, took to my heels, collared my gentleman, and brought him back to where there was already quite a group about the screaming child. He was perfectly cool, and made no resistance, but gave me one look, so ugly that it brought out the sweat in me like running. The people who had turned out were the girl's own family, and, pretty soon, the doctor, for whom she had been sent, put in his appearance. Well, the child was not much the worse, more frightened, according to the sawbones, and there you might have supposed there'd be an end to it. But there was one curious circumstance. I had taken a loathing to my gentleman at first sight. So had the child's family, which was only natural, but the doctor's case was what struck me. He was the usual cut-and-dry apothecary of no particular age and colour, with a strong Edinburgh accent and about as emotional as a bagpipe. Well, sir, he was like the rest of us. Every time he looked at my prisoner, I saw that sawbones turn sick and white with the desire to kill him. I knew what was in his mind, just as he knew what was in mine. And killing being out of the question, we did the next best. We told the man we could, and would, make such a scandal out of this as would make his name stink from one end of London to the other. If he had any friends, or any credit, we undertook that he should lose them. And all the time, as we were pitching it in red hot, we were keeping the woman off him as best we could, for they were as wild as harpies. I never saw such a circle of such hateful faces. And there was the man in the middle, with a kind of black, sneering coolness. Frightened too, I could see that, but carrying it off, sir, really like Satan. Let's now analyse this extract. We're going to cover two main ideas today. This is our first one. Stevenson presents Hyde as a malicious character in this extract. Let me first explain what this word malicious means. The word malicious describes someone who deliberately attempts to hurt other people. Sometimes we hurt other people by mistake. For example, when you play football, you might mistime a tackle and foul another player. This is an accident. You did not mean to hurt them. This is not a malicious tackle. But a malicious challenge in football would be a deliberate foul, in which you weren't attempting to get the ball at all, but rather injure the other player. A malicious person hurts others on purpose. Now, Stevenson presents Hyde as a malicious character in this extract. We can see this through Hyde's choice of victim. Hyde tramples a girl of maybe 8 or 10. It is particularly disturbing that Hyde should choose to attack such a victim. One of the things that makes this attack so disturbing is the clear power imbalance between these two characters. The strong and lively Mr. Hyde is attacking this young, vulnerable child. He's not attacking someone who could defend themselves. He's not attacking another adult. Hyde is attacking a helpless girl. But there's a deeper reason why this description is so disturbing. Stevenson provides no clear motivation for Hyde's attack. This little girl seems rather harmless. She poses no threat to Hyde, and it's clear that she hasn't done anything to hurt Hyde. So why would Hyde choose to attack this girl? Well, perhaps it's important to think about what this girl represents. This girl, like other children, is a symbol of purity and innocence. Perhaps Hyde attacks this girl because she represents these virtues. There's maybe something about goodness that makes Hyde angry. Now, this is a particularly significant extract for our study of Mr. Hyde, because it's the first description that we have of this character in the novel. It's the first impression that we get of this villain. This event thus introduces Hyde's role in the novel to the reader. He is a malicious character who actively seeks to destroy all that is innocent and good. Our sense that Hyde is a malicious character is further reinforced by Stevenson's description of this juggernaut running over the girl. So Stevenson's using a metaphor here comparing Hyde to a juggernaut. A juggernaut is a large, heavy and powerful vehicle. Imagine something with the same weight and force as a tank. This metaphor conveys Hyde's intimidating strength, and the way that he mercilessly plows over the helpless child. Stevenson is really emphasizing the brutality of this attack here. It's not as if Hyde simply knocks into the young girl. This attack is far more violent than that. He crushes her body into the pavement. Now, there is an alternative interpretation of this metaphor, which we don't have time to look at in this video. You can, however, see a full explanation in my resource. For me, the most disturbing description in this extract is Stevenson's words that Hyde trampled calmly over the young girl. Now, this description uses juxtaposition. Juxtaposition is when you have two opposite words or descriptions side by side. Let's take a closer look. Take a look at these two words, trampled, calmly. These two words look rather strange when they are placed side by side, because they both describe very different things. The verb trampled describes a very violent action. but the adverb calmly describes someone feeling composed and at peace. In other words, Hyde feels composed and calm as he violently tramples this young girl. It's strange that he feels this way. If you trampled a young child on the street, you would not feel composed or calm at all. You would probably feel desperately upset and very apologetic. So Hyde's sense of composure and calm is indicative of his lack of remorse for this violent attack. So this use of juxtaposition emphasizes Hyde's lack of remorse for such a violent act. Now, the idea that Hyde trampled calmly over the young girl is also suggesting that he was in complete control of his actions. Perhaps he deliberately carried out such a cruel act of violence. He feels no remorse at all. Stevenson thus introduces Hyde's malicious nature right from the opening of this book. And that's us finish our first idea. Stevenson presents Hyde as a malicious character in this extract. Let's now test your memory. The key word is going to disappear. You have 10 seconds to fill in the key word. Off you go. Okay, let's see how well we have done. Stevenson presents Hyde as a malicious character in this extract. Well done if you got that right. Let's go on to our second idea. Stevenson presents Hyde as a corrupting influence in this extract. A corrupting influence is someone who brings out the worst in others. So maybe in the past you have been friends with someone who's been a bad influence in your life, someone who's maybe made you a meaner or more unkind person. You could describe that person as a corrupting influence. They have brought out the worst sides of your personality. You may remember that Hyde is surrounded by members of the public who are furious about this attack. Well, this is an interesting description, because it's not just Hyde who seems terrifying, but the members of this angry mob as well. Indeed, Stevenson uses some of the most disturbing language of this extract to describe this crowd. For example, Stevenson firstly describes the sawbones. This is another word for a doctor, by the way. Now, this doctor turns sick and white with a desire to kill Hyde. Stevenson is using irony here, because this doctor is a man who is employed to save lives. But now that he sees Mr. Hyde, he wants to take life and murder this criminal. So the doctor is being driven to act in a way that is completely against society's expectations for his role. Stevenson is thus suggesting that Hyde's presence has brought the doctor's evil tendencies to life. Stevenson similarly uses irony in his description of a woman around Mr. Hyde turning as wild as harpies in anger. Now, Victorian readers would have found this simile particularly striking. The cultural norm of the day expected women to act with grace and meekness. Hyde's presence has, however, shattered the influence of such societal expectations. The adjective wild gives the impression that the women are out of control in their aggressive anger towards Hyde. The simile comparing the women to harpies is also striking. A harpy is a fierce, mythical monster. You can see a picture of one there. They've got long, sharp talons, and they can fly as well, so they're a rather terrifying monster. This simile suggests that these women have become vicious and violent in Hyde's presence. Society's expectations for the behavior of these women thus seem to break in Hyde's presence. They are no longer acting with the grace and meekness expected of Victorian women, but are now dangerous and vengeful. Hyde's presence has thus brought the evil tendencies of these women to life. Hyde brings out the worst in people. In his presence, people seem to lose the constraints of society's civilizing influence. Around Mr. Hyde, the Doctor loses his will to save life and wants to take life, and the women lose all sense of grace and gentleness, and instead become as wild as harpies. Mr. Hyde brings out the worst of these characters. Mr. Hyde is thus presented as a corrupting influence. We've now finished our second idea. Stevenson presents Hyde as a corrupting influence. Let's read through these two sentences once again before we test your memory. Number 1, Stevenson presents Hyde as a malicious character in this extract. And number 2, Stevenson presents Hyde as a corrupting influence. Okay, you have 20 seconds to fill in the key words. Off you go. Okay, let's see how well we have done. Number 1, Stevenson presents Hyde as a malicious character in this extract. And number 2, Stevenson presents Hyde as a corrupting influence. Well done if you got both of those right. And let's now go on to our final thought for this lesson. This extract demonstrates Hyde's evil nature. In his violent trampling of the innocent young girl, Hyde's malicious nature is most powerfully revealed. But it's not just Mr. Hyde's violent passions that are revealed in this extract. We also see the vicious, evil tendencies of the Doctor and the woman as well. Now, this brings us to an important question about this text. What does Hyde represent in this novel? Well, here's one idea. Mr. Hyde is perhaps a mirror image of each individual's darkest passions. He shows us what we would become when stripped from society's civilizing influences. We see a reflection of this idea in our extract. Around Mr. Hyde, the Doctor loses his will to save life and wants to take life, and the women lose all sense of grace and gentleness and instead become as wild as harpies. Perhaps Stevenson is using these descriptions to reveal Hyde's symbolic role in this novel. Hyde is not just a symbol of Jekyll's evil nature, but also the evil nature of humanity itself. In looking at Hyde's character, we are thus examining the darkest aspects of human nature. And that brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I will be releasing more Jekyll and Hyde videos across the coming weeks and months. You can also see a playlist of other Jekyll and Hyde videos on this page as well. But for now, all the best.